Few parts of the Bible are as short yet as unsettling as those that mention the Nephilim, giant, powerful beings who, according to ancient traditions, once lived among humans and influenced the course of civilization before the Great Flood. Most readers simply pass over these verses without much thought, but those who stop to question and look deeper find something far greater than what is usually shared in Sunday sermons. One of the least discussed, yet most troubling as questions is this: if giants truly existed, then were there also female giants? Where is the evidence of these so-called giantesses? Why do we never hear about them in official histories or even in the boldest theories of mainstream archaeology? In this episode, we'll travel through forgotten paths, forbidden writings, and overlooked discoveries to explore whether such colossal women ever existed. And if they did, their existence could completely reshape how we understand these mysterious beings and their role in early human civilization before the flood. This question has become one of the most discussed and debated topics among both curious researchers and scholars interested in biblical and historical mysteries. The Nephilim inspire both fascination and confusion, as many try to understand the strange circumstances under which these beings appeared. According to the Bible, the Nephilim were a race of giants born from the union between the sons of God, often interpreted as fallen angels or watchers, and human women. This story appears directly in Genesis 6 and is echoed in the book of Jude, which also refers to these celestial beings. From this point arises a major question that has captured the attention of many. Did female giants, the counterparts of the Nephilim males, exist in ancient times? Were there towering women who lived beside these enormous men? This question is especially intriguing because in both the Bible and most apocryphal texts, giants are almost always described as male. Even in the myths of many ancient cultures that speak of enormous beings, the focus is nearly always on male figures, with little or no mention of women who shared the same incredible size and power. Because of this, the mystery surrounding the possible existence of giantesses, female giants, still remains today. It has become one of the greatest puzzles that continues to fascinate both Bible scholars and enthusiasts of ancient myths. The absence of any mention of these women in the Bible or mythology makes the subject even more complex. Many people wonder if the silence truly means that giant women never existed, or if perhaps the ancient writers chose not to mention them, either for cultural, symbolic, or religious reasons. Some researchers believe this lack of references simply reflects the ancient world's tendency to focus on male figures, using them as symbols of power and dominance in mythology. Others, however, think this silence might hint at something deeper, maybe even proof that female giants never existed at all. This question not only causes confusion, but also awakens the curiosity of Bible readers, students of theology, and anyone interested in uncovering the mysteries hidden in Scripture. Over the centuries, debates about the true nature of the Nephilim and the possible existence of female giants have led to many interpretations, some careful and conservative, others daring and imaginative. But all of them try to explain what really happened during that distant age of humanity. Because of the complexity of the topic, there are no clear or final answers that can prove whether these giant women ever existed. What we have are theories and hypotheses, ideas based on old writings and theological reflections, that attempt to bring light to these mysterious beings. One of the main theories about the existence of giantesses comes from the belief that the Nephilim were hybrids, the offspring of a union between the Watchers, fallen angels, and human women. If that's the case, then it would be possible for female giants to have been born as well. But this raises more questions. How could they have been conceived? And what would their purpose or role have been in ancient history and myth? To explore this further, it is important to look at the different viewpoints and interpretations surrounding the idea of these colossal women. One widely accepted view is that the giants described in some biblical interpretations were not fully human but hybrid beings, the result of crossbreeding between different species. This would explain their enormous height and unusual physical features. According to this interpretation, the Nephilim were also believed to have extraordinary lifespans, living far longer than ordinary humans, whose lives during that era typically ranged from 500 to 900 years. Notable examples include Methuselah, said to have lived 969 years, and Noah, who supposedly lived 950 years, both far beyond normal human limits. Supporters of this view argue that the giants had a unique biological makeup that allowed them to live for much longer periods. Some even claim they could live up to 3 times longer than regular humans. However, this great longevity may have come with a price: infertility. Over time, these beings might have become unable to reproduce, leading to the end of their lineage. In this theory, the Nephilim were sterile hybrids, incapable of creating descendants of their own kind. If true, this could explain why no later generation of giants or giantesses survived after them. In this interpretation, the idea of giantesses begins to lose purpose. If male giants were sterile and unable to reproduce, then female giants would serve no biological role, since the continuation of the Nephilim lineage would have been impossible. This is where one of the main divisions of thought on this topic arises. If the giants were truly hybrid beings who could not reproduce, then were female giants biologically impossible, or were they simply left out of ancient stories for other reasons? These questions are still discussed in academic and theological circles today, but no final agreement has been reached. The second perspective, however, takes a different approach. It considers the possibility that female giants did exist, challenging the traditional idea that all Nephilim were male. According to this line of reasoning, it is possible that giant women lived alongside the male Nephilim and may have been their natural partners. This theory follows a logical argument. If the giants truly stood between 3 to 5 meters tall, roughly 10 to 16 feet, then it would have been extremely unlikely for them to have relationships with ordinary-sized human women. The huge difference in size would make such unions physically unrealistic. Therefore, it seems far more plausible that giants would have needed female partners of similar size for reproduction to occur naturally. This theory gains additional support when we consider the role of women in both historical and biblical traditions. In ancient biblical societies, female figures were rarely mentioned in genealogies or central narratives. This omission can be explained by the patriarchal culture of ancient Semitic civilizations, where men were typically given prominence. Biblical genealogies often focused almost entirely on male descendants, since they were the ones who carried the family name and continued the bloodline. Although women played important and influential roles in society, they were often left in the background or mentioned only briefly. This male-centered focus extended beyond family records to myths, legends, and historical accounts. The great deeds, wars, and legacies were typically attributed to men, while women, though vital, were rarely placed at the center of these stories. For this reason, many scholars believe that the absence of giantesses in the Bible and other ancient writings might not mean they didn't exist at all. Instead, their lack of mention could simply reflect the patriarchal mindset of the time, a cultural bias that shaped not only history and myth, but also the very language of Scripture itself. Therefore, the absence of any direct mention of female giants does not necessarily mean they never existed. Instead, it likely reflects a limitation of ancient storytelling, which focused mainly on male figures. From this perspective, the idea that giants had female partners is not only a biological and logical possibility, but also an example of how ancient texts often ignored what they considered secondary details, especially when it came to women who were rarely given the same importance as men in genealogies and sacred writings. If we accept the possibility that giantesses once existed, it gives us a more complete picture of how the Nephilim lineage might have continued. It suggests that these giant males were not born from a single isolated event, but rather through a reproductive system involving both male and female beings whose lineages were equally significant, even if they were omitted from the written records. Supporters of this theory also point to mythologies from other ancient cultures, where giant men were often accompanied by powerful female counterparts. In Greek mythology, for example, the mighty Titans often had equally formidable wives or partners. In Norse myths and other ancient traditions, women with supernatural strength and size were not unusual. These parallels suggest that the idea of giantesses was not unique to one culture, but part of a shared global imagination, a recurring theme in myths that describe extraordinary beings of both genders. Thus, the idea that giant women were intentionally left out of biblical and historical texts may reflect the power structures and male-centered storytelling of the time. In a world where lineage, authority, and inheritance passed from father to son, female figures, including giantesses, were often pushed into the background, viewed as supporting roles rather than central characters. Seen this way, the absence of giantesses in Scripture doesn't prove they never existed. It simply shows how ancient writers prioritized patriarchal narratives. The omission was likely a reflection of cultural norms, not biological impossibility. For those who support this theory, giantesses were essential partners in the continuation of the Nephilim race. Their silence in the record is seen not as denial of their existence, but as a deliberate narrative choice shaped by the culture of the time. A third perspective, however, brings the discussion back to the idea that the giants were sterile, similar to the first theory, but with additional layers worth exploring. This view suggests that giants, being hybrid beings, could have lived extraordinarily long lives, perhaps 3 times longer than ordinary humans. In the biblical accounts, humans such as Adam, Noah, and Methuselah were said to live over 900 years. Following that logic, the giants, who were born from the union of fallen angels and human women, might have lived even longer due to their celestial ancestry. According to this theory, their extended lifespans meant that they didn't need descendants to continue their presence on Earth. Their longevity alone could sustain their existence for countless generations. This would explain why there are no records of female giants or offspring. The giants could live for centuries without needing to reproduce to maintain their numbers, even after wars or near extinction. In this view, the giants were seen as immortal or extremely long-lived beings who, even without producing descendants, could continue to exist on Earth for thousands of years. Their extraordinary lifespans alone would allow them to remain through many generations of humankind. It is also significant that giants reappear in the Bible after the flood, which raises one of the most intriguing mysteries in Scripture. How could they still exist if the flood had destroyed all living humans, except for Noah and his family? Many scholars see this as one of the Bible's greatest puzzles. The most common explanation among those who support this theory is that after the flood, the fallen angels, also known as the Watchers, returned to Earth, and once again united with human women, giving rise to a second generation of Nephilim. This possibility, that another race of giants was born after divine judgment, finds support in certain biblical interpretations, suggesting that the Watchers, despite being punished, continued their interference with humanity even after the flood. However, even with this supposed return, the giants began to weaken and decline over time. Though they remained powerful and terrifying for a while, their numbers slowly dwindled, especially as human civilizations grew stronger and wars against them increased. One notable account of this decline appears in Genesis 14, which tells of an ancient war between several kings and 3 tribes of giants. In that story, 5 human kings formed an alliance, fought against the giants, and defeated them. This battle is symbolic. It marks not only the fall of the giants, but also the moment when humanity began to overcome these mighty beings. This pattern of decline continues throughout the Bible. The most famous example is the story of David and Goliath, a confrontation that captures the final chapter in the giants' long struggle against mankind. Goliath, described as a warrior more than 3 meters tall, stands as one of the last and most iconic giants ever mentioned in Scripture. His defeat at the hands of the young shepherd David represents far more than a single victory. It symbolizes the end of an era, the downfall of a once dominant race that had ruled through fear and strength. Goliath's death became a turning point, the fall of a being who, though once revered and invincible, was now brought low by faith, courage, and divine purpose. His story stands as a final echo of a fading lineage, the last roar of the giants before their presence vanished into history. Although the number of giants decreased over time, it is important to note that many ancient civilizations continue to remember them as awe-inspiring beings. and in some cases even worshipped them as gods or divine offspring. Across many cultures, stories of giants varied greatly, yet they shared one common theme. These beings possessed extraordinary powers. They performed heroic, even godlike deeds, and often appeared as agents of destiny, shaping the foundations of entire civilizations. This deep reverence reflected not only humanity's imagination about their immense size and strength, but also a sense of divine power, a force that seemed far beyond human understanding. For many ancient peoples, giants were not merely creatures to be feared, but also figures of sacred respect. When myths depicted interactions between humans and giants, they were often filled with awe and reverence, as if mankind were encountering beings from a higher realm. In Greek mythology, for instance, the epic battles known as the Titanomachy, the war between the younger gods and the elder titans, symbolized a cosmic struggle between generations of divine beings, perfectly illustrating humanity's attempt to comprehend the relationship between the mortal and the supernatural. In the biblical tradition, similar themes appear. The accounts describing the giants as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men carry an air of both mystery and warning, a story woven with power, danger, and transcendence. Over time, however, the presence of giants in historical and religious records gradually faded. Their disappearance was not sudden, but slow and symbolic, a reflection of the passing of an age in which they once dominated human imagination. As human civilizations advanced, the era of the giants waned. The mighty beings who once represented unstoppable strength were either forgotten or absorbed into myth, transformed into distant legends. Yet their decline does not mean they were ever truly invincible. Even in Scripture, the giants' defeats, most famously David's victory over Goliath, reveal not just their physical downfall, but also a spiritual message. These stories symbolize more than battles of flesh and bone. They portray the eternal conflict between good and evil, faith and fear, divine purpose and corrupted power. The fall of the giants mirrors the rise of human courage and virtue, representing how faith and moral strength can overcome even the greatest physical might. This broader cultural and historical backdrop invites us to reflect on how ancient societies viewed the giants, and especially their possible interactions with women. Some legends claim that at certain points, giants took human women and produced hybrid offspring. Yet the topic of female giants or giantesses remains one of the most overlooked and controversial subjects in ancient writings. Most texts, including the Bible, focus almost entirely on male giants, leaving little or no mention of women of their kind. This absence may reflect more than lost history. It could reveal a cultural omission shaped by patriarchal societies, which often silence the female presence in myth and history alike. Still, we are left with a vital question. Does the lack of mention truly mean that giantesses never existed? Or does it reveal a bias of ancient culture, one that simply chose not to record their existence? The truth is, without direct evidence, we cannot say for certain. But silence in the texts does not necessarily equal absence in reality. To reach deeper and more meaningful conclusions about this subject, a comprehensive study is required, one that goes beyond simply reading the scriptures. Such an investigation must also consider the cultural, social, and historical influences that shaped how these stories were told. The questions surrounding the existence of giantesses and the possibility that there once existed a society of giants composed of both men and women remain open to debate among scholars, theologians, and students of ancient civilizations. Some researchers propose that the relationship between giants and humans may have been far more complex than mere hostility or opposition. There could have been moments of interaction, coexistence, and even intermarriage, resulting in mixed bloodlines that linked humanity with these colossal beings. Other theories suggest that the giants were hybrid entities born from the union of divine or celestial beings and humans, a concept found not only in the Bible, but also in many world mythologies from Sumerian and Greek to ancient Mesopotamian traditions. This idea continues to attract the attention of modern researchers across multiple disciplines, each offering their own interpretations of these mysterious unions. Now, we would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this fascinating topic? Do you believe in the possibility that female giants, giantesses, once existed? Could there have been an ancient civilization of giants where both sexes lived, ruled, and reproduced? Or do you lean toward the theory that the giants were hybrids, the offspring of divine beings who once walked among humankind? Share your reflections and insights in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If this journey through the mysteries of the giants has deepened your understanding or stirred your curiosity about scripture and ancient myth, please consider liking and sharing this video. Your support helps spread these thought-provoking discussions to others who, like you, seek to uncover the hidden layers of faith, history, and divine mystery. And of course, stay connected. In our next episode, we'll dive even deeper into the origins, theories, and revelations surrounding these ancient beings. Insights that will surely challenge and surprise you. Thank you for joining us on this journey so far. Until next time, may wisdom guide your search, and may truth reveal itself in the stories of the past.